Hey guys, and welcome to The Broken Sword. The Battle of Fornost was the climactic battle that led to the defeat of the Witch King and his forces of Angmar. But how did the Black Captain gain so much power there in the first place? In today's video we will be focusing on the Witch King's rise to power and then detailing this epic battle of Fornost. Let's get into it.
Build me an army worthy of Mordor.
Over 1,000 years after Mordor fell at the end of the Second Age, Sauron had started rebuilding himself and the strength of his forces from Dol Guldur. Then, around the year 1300 of the Third Age, the Nazgul also resurfaced, and the Witch King, under instruction from the Dark Lord, established his kingdom in Angmar. His capital was Khârn Dûm, and it was situated north of the Etten Moors and the Misty Mountains. He summoned to him evil men, orcs, and other creatures of evil to fight under his banner. No one knew that he was actually a servant of the long-dormant Sauron, and very few even knew that he was a wraith. The sole purpose of this force was to completely destroy the already fading forces of the Dunedain of the North. In Arnor, the Dunedain already had internal problems, splitting into three kingdoms, Cardolan, Rhudaur, and Arthedain, and these were constantly at war with each other. The Witch King could see that due to these inner struggles, Arnor was the much more vulnerable target than Gondor. He played upon their weakness and sent his own men to infiltrate their ranks. By the year 1349 of the Third Age, the government of Rhudaur was controlled by men in the service of the Witch King, and no one in the kingdom had any idea. He used this to his advantage, and aided Rhudaur in its wars with the other two kingdoms. Around this time, a man called Argaleb had taken up lordship of Arthedain, and seeing as the line of kings had ended in the kingdoms of Cardolan and Rhudaur, it effectively made him the 17th king of all of Arnor. Cardolan accepted this rule, but of course Rhudaur resisted the claim. As tensions with Angmar increased, Argaleb fortified his border. A great bastion arose on Weathertop. For close to half a century the line held, though Argaleb lost his life in battle with the men of Rhudaur. His son Arvaleg thus became the 8th king of Arthedain. He continued the war. And with the help of the Dunedain of Cardolan and the elves of Lindon, Arvaleg managed to drive out the enemies from the Weathered Hills. Arthedain and Cardolan kept a guarded border along the Weather Hills, the East Road and the Lower Horwell. This defence was apparently effective as the Witch King did not trouble the men and had sent his troops further east to Rivendell. But in 1409 he came forth with such a force from Angmar and Rhudaur that no army could stop him. They crossed the Horwell, occupied Cardolan, and closed in on Weathertop. He razed Amonsul and brought its mighty walls down. In a bloody battle, both Arvaleg and the Prince of Cardolan were slain. The Palantir of Amonsul could be saved, however, and was brought to the capital of Arthedain, Fornost. After centuries of further conflict, messages were sent in 1973 to the King of Gondor, Eärnil II. He was informed that Arthedain, the last standing remnant of Arnor, was in serious trouble, and that Angmar was preparing its final assault. So in response, the king sent his son Eärnur with a fleet of ships to Lindon to aid the northern Dunedain. However, it was too late. Arthedain had already fallen. It had been destroyed in the fall of Fornost by the Witch King's armies. The remaining forces had fled west over the river to the realm of Lindon, where Eärnur reached the havens with his massive fleet. There was so much joy and wonder among the elves and men. Círdan, Lord of Lindon, summoned all who could fight from both his realms and the remnants of the Dunedain of the north. When all the preparations were finished, this allied host of the west marched east across the River Lune to challenge the Witch King in Fornost, which was populated with his minions, usurping the house and rule of the kings. News of their march soon came to the Witch King. In his pride, he sent out his men to meet them instead of waiting for battle within the fortress-like city, thinking he could drive them back over the Lune as before. The allies had passed over the southern hills of Evendim, and they met the forces of Angmar on the plains between Nennuil and Fornost. A great battle ensued. When Angmar's forces began to retreat back to Fornost, out of the north came the main body of the allies' horsemen, which had passed around the hills to come down and scatter the enemy in a rout. The Witch King, with all that he could rally, fled north to the lands of Angmar. Before he could make it safely to his old fortress of Khârn Dûm, he was overtaken by the cavalry of Gondor, with Prince Eärnur at its head. Simultaneously, a force led by Glorfindel came out of Rivendell. These two forces so utterly crushed the host of Angmar that not a single man or orc of that realm remained west of the Misty Mountains. However, when all was lost, the Witch King appeared. He singled out Eonar and rode upon him with a cry. The prince could withstand him, but his horse was so frightened that while bearing him, it fled far away before he could master it. As the Witch King laughed at this, Glorfindel rode up on his white horse, and in mid-laugh, the Witch King fled into the darkness of the night. After hundreds of years, the war was over. Eonar returned, and Glorfindel said to him, "Do not pursue him, he will not return to this land. Far off yet is his doom, and not by the hand of man will he fall." I'm assuming you all know what this prophecy refers to. Anyway, the North was freed from the evil of the realm of Angmar, but since Arthedain had been destroyed, those Dunedain that remained became wanderers, the Rangers of the North. Aranarth, son of King Arvedui, became their chieftain. He would be the first of a great line of chieftain of the Dunedain, all the way up to Aragorn. The Witch King eventually made it to Mordor in 1980, where he gathered the Nazgul. In the year 2000 of the Third Age, they besieged Minas Ithil, and 2 years on they took it for themselves. In 2043, the Witch King sent a challenge to Eonar, who had become king that same year. Eonar was a good king, and a mighty and very proud man. Eonar was a man like his father in valour, but not in wisdom. He was a man of strong body and hot mood, but he would take no wife, for his only pleasure was in fighting, or in the exercise of arms. His prowess was such that none in Gondor could stand against him in those weapon sports in which he delighted, seeming rather a champion than a captain or king, and retaining his vigour and skill to a later age than was usual. When Eonar received the crown in 2043, the king of Minas Morgul challenged him to single combat, taunting him that he had not dared to stand before him in the Battle of the North. For that time, Mardil the steward restrained the wrath of the king. Minas Anor, which had become the chief city of the realm since the days of King Telemnar and the residence of the kings, was now renamed Minas Tirith, as the city ever on guard against the evil of Morgul. Eonar had held the crown only 7 years when the Lord of Morgul repeated his challenge, taunting the king that to the faint heart of his youth, he had now added the weakness of age. Then Mardil could no longer restrain him, and he rode with a small escort of knights to the gates of Minas Morgul. None of that riding were ever heard of again. It was believed in Gondor that the faithless enemy had trapped the king, and that he died in torment in Minas Morgul. But since there were no witnesses of his death, Mardil the Good Steward ruled Gondor in his name for many years. It was actually following the loss of this last king that the realm of Gondor was then ruled by the stewards. Now, as I'm sure many of you know, there have been many theories about King Eonar. Many believe he perhaps became one of the Nazgul, which I guess is a possibility. Even though the 9 already existed at this point in time, 7 of them are unnamed, so who's to say that they had not been changed or replaced? If you guys would be interested in a full video on King Eonar, where we cover his life and perhaps some of the theories of what happened to him, then be sure to let us know in the comments down below. That's it for the rise of the Witch King and the Battle of Fornost, guys. I really hope you enjoyed this video. That's it from me today, my friends. As always, I would love to thank all of our patrons and channel members for your support. It would really be hard to continue doing this all the time, full time, if it wasn't for all of your extra support. I know many of you are looking for updates on our upcoming short film, but of course it's been a very slow year with everything that's gone on, both throughout the world and personally, but we will be getting to it, don't you worry, and as soon as we are at work in production, you guys will be getting weekly updates. Again, thank you all so much for watching. I really hope you have a great day, and I will see you next time on The Broken Sword.
Build me an army worthy of